welcome back to the third video on my series about leading projects and project leadership. I'm Dave Gowell, and I practice and teach how to lead projects. If you haven't seen the first two videos in this series yet, you might find it very beneficial to go back and watch them first, because this session will make a lot more sense if you do. In this video, I'll be talking about the 5 most important parts of any project. And I'll be showing you some really great examples of big projects that demonstrate those 5 parts. The other titles in this series are the 5 Steps of Progress, where we'll examine the natural progression that we all go through when we lead a project or do anything else for that matter. And the final video of the series, Friendly Advice for Project Leaders, in which I'll share some of the best advice that I've ever heard. Let's look at projects a little more closely now. I think there are 5 important parts to every project. 5 main parts. Number 1, who is involved? That includes every person the project leader needs to interact with, and the details about what that person needs to know, and when they need to know it, and how we will conduct that communication. People are the most important part of anything. We are people. Everything we do is done for people, either to help people or to get them to help us, or so we can spend more time with them. Everything we do for people. What are we doing? What is the unique end result of this project? What are we trying to build or make or achieve? It might be a tangible thing or an intangible action or status or state. We need a very clear vision of what the project will create and all the things we will do along the way. When are we going to do it? When will we start? And when will we finish? And I don't just mean the project as a whole, but also every little piece of the project, every single task or activity. 4, where are we doing it? This includes all the pertinent facts about the organization conducting the project and the geographical and financial and other environmental conditions that might affect the project. This also includes what might go wrong. 5, how can we do it? This includes what we know, who we know, and what we have. That means equipment, supplies, and of course, money. These 5 questions are fundamental to life. You can ask them about anything. In fact, they teach them in journalism school as the basic components to every story. When leading projects, they're like building blocks, each one dependent upon the level under it, like the courses of a pyramid. Without a who, there can be no one to do the what. It takes people to do something. It takes people to do anything. And for people to do anything, obviously they have to start. They start at some specific time. When they start doing it will determine when they finish. The sooner we start, the sooner we'll be done, right? And as soon as we start doing anything, we must be somewhere, right? We can't do anything unless we're located somewhere. And the only other big question we need to answer is, how are we going to do this amazing thing? Of course, you could divide projects differently into more or less than 5 parts if you want. For example, PMI divides project management into 10 knowledge areas: integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communications, risk, procurement, and stakeholders. These 10 areas cover the exact same topics as my 5 questions, and my 5 questions cover all the same topics as PMI's 10 knowledge areas. You could divide any subject matter into any number of parts that you want. But I like the number 5. I have 5 digits on each hand, so I can count to 5 very easily. In fact, I can literally count to 5 with one hand tied behind my back. So I'm sticking to 5. Now, we get to the fun part. As I've said, I love projects. Did I mention that? Over the past 50 years, I've been very lucky that I got to do a bit of traveling and I got to personally see some really cool projects. And there's a few other fascinating projects that I haven't seen personally, but I've studied them. I'd like to show you some of my favorite projects of all time. And I'd like to tell you what I've learned from some of them, or what aspect of leading projects they remind me of. And 5 of them really remind me of the 5 parts of a project I just talked about. So I'll show you those 5, and I'll tell you why they do. Of course, each project must contain all 5 parts of a project. For various reasons, these particular projects happen to remind me of these 5 parts in particular. Naturally, we start with who? Because every single project starts with people. And that reminds me of the Grand Palace of Bangkok. Construction began in 1782 at the order of King Rama I of Siam. The palace didn't build itself. It was built by people. And it is exquisitely beautiful. If you walk up to any exterior wall and stand about a foot away, you will be amazed at the incredibly fine detail. Every square inch is covered by dozens of tiny mirrors or tiles or cut gemstones or carvings. A lot of very skilled people did all that work in artistry. Here's a story about the people that I think I heard from a tour guide in Thailand, but memory is a very strange thing, so I may have some of this wrong. In the mid-1700s, Rama I, who was the great-grandfather of Rama IV, who was the king portrayed in The King and I, moved the capital of Siam from Ayutthaya to what is now called Bangkok, and he built the Grand Palace. One of the Ramas, I think it may have been Rama II, decreed that the Grand Palace should be more than just a seat of government, it should also be a place of learning. He commanded that the Thai language should have a written form. It had only been a verbal language up to that point, so that knowledge could be more easily shared and preserved. Then he sent his emissaries to the far corners of Siam to find the most skillful people in every craft and discipline and bring them back to the Grand Palace to start various schools of learning. He housed them and fed them and encouraged them to learn and study and teach each other. For example, he brought together all the best shoemakers and told them to teach each other how to make the very best shoes. He brought together all the best rice farmers, and they studied and shared the best methods of rice production. In fact, they got so good at rice production that soon Siam became the #1 exporter of rice in the entire world. And they stayed that way for many years until a couple of Aggies from Texas A&M came to Thailand to study rice production. And the Thais graciously showed them everything they knew. And guess which country is the #1 exporter of rice now? No, not the United States. It's the country of Texas. Yeehaw! And King Rama also brought to the Grand Palace all the best cooks and chefs from all over Siam to study the art of cooking. Hey, this was in the late 1700s. Le Cordon Bleu Cooking School of Paris was founded in 1895. So Thailand had a culinary school 100 years before the French did, which might explain why Thai cuisine is the best cuisine in the world, in my opinion. So how did he do it? By focusing on the who part of his project. He searched for and brought together all the best people he could find. And he concentrated on training and team building. Training and team building who? People. That's who. The second question answers the second part of leading projects, which is what? The question of what always reminds me of the Great Wall of China, because that's a very big what. This was a huge project in every sense of the word. As far as I know, it's the largest thing humans have ever made. The project started in 455 BCE, and the last section was completed in 1644. That's a construction project that took over 2,000 years. The government of China says the official length is 8,850 kilometers, which is 5,500 miles. That's about 3 times the length of the border between the United States and Mexico. 3 times. It's not actually one continuous wall, but more like about 100 separate sections of wall, many of them jutting off each other in different directions. The original purpose was for protection against the Mongol nomads that lived to the north, and also against neighboring kingdoms in China. Ironically, the wall didn't stop Genghis Khan, or his son Mengke, or his grandson Kublai Khan, all of whom successfully invaded China when the wall was at its best. The Great Wall reminds me of the second part of projects. What? For several reasons. First, the Great Wall is the largest physical thing that humans have ever created. It's a very big what, and it's a giant fence. They say good fences make good neighbors. The purpose of all fences is to make a clear boundary between one side and the other. For example, there's a fence between my yard and my neighbor's. It clearly marks which part of the yard I have to mow and which part I don't. The second part of a project is what? What are we going to do? And that means, what are we not going to do? The third part of leading projects is when. And Stonehenge reminds me of this part. Smart people have been studying this complex arrangement of stones for thousands of years. They still don't know exactly when it was started. But one of the things that we figured out is it's a calendar, one that has been 100% accurate for all those years. See, among other things, it tells you exactly when it's summer solstice and winter solstice. That can help farmers know just when to plant their barley. Because if you plant too soon, a late frost can kill the plants. If you plant too late, the barley won't get enough sun in the autumn to ripen properly. Do you wonder why it's so damn important to get a great crop of barley? If you're asking such a silly question, you must not know that barley makes beer. And even more important, beer makes whiskey. And my Celtic ancestors surely did appreciate those fine products. That's why Stonehenge reminds me of when. And speaking of where, that's the fourth question and the fourth part of leading projects. Where do you think we should go to explore that question? In 1113, deep in the dark jungles of Cambodia, a new king came along named Suryavarman II. He seemed to have a special relationship to an old Brahmin sage named Divakara Pandita. He not only had the sage perform his coronations, he had 2 of them, but he also showered the sage with expensive gifts and appears to have sent him on a long journey to visit many temples and sacred sites in the Khmer Empire. I suspect The king may have been preparing the sage to design his own magnificent temple city, Angkor Wat. We don't know much about the history of this project, but we can see some of the results. It eventually covered 402 acres. It was bigger than London, and it may have housed up to 1 million people. It contained an extensive network of boats, canals, pools, ponds, and reservoirs. Why so many water features? Well, you see, the Cambodian jungles have a big water problem. About 52 inches of rain falls each year, about the same as Florida. But almost all of it falls between May and October. In December, January, February, and March, there's almost no rain. The land dries up. Then for a few crazy months during the monsoon season, it rains like hell. The only way to sustain a large population in a place like that is to collect as much water as you can when it rains, so you'll have enough during the dry season. The area around Angkor Wat looks to me like a huge water management project. They moved the water to precisely where they wanted it, which is why Angkor Wat reminds me of the fourth crucial part of leading projects: where. You have to understand the environment where your project is located. You need to understand the land, the marketplace conditions, the economic situations, the political climate, and the prevailing winds and weather. When my wife Sandy and I were first married, we lived in Henderson, Nevada, a bedroom community that serves Las Vegas. We lived about 15 miles west of Hoover Dam. And every time we went to visit our friend, Cowboy Chris in Useless, Texas, we drove over the top of Hoover Dam to get there. Once we stopped and took the tour and saw what was inside, and it's amazing. This project cost $49 million in 1935. It was the largest concrete structure ever constructed. 5,000 otherwise out-of-work guys got paid $1 an hour to risk their life doing this. Over 100 of them died on the job, but no bodies are buried in the concrete. What's most interesting to me as a project leader is how profitable this project turned out to be. The federal government earns over $4 million every year from selling the water, and over $63 million each year from selling the electricity. Over the past 84 years, that project has produced over $5 billion in profit. The how question of projects includes what the project costs, but also what the project is worth, or the amount of income it generates. And it also refers to the resources used. No one had ever purchased that much concrete before. How also relates to the skills and processes you need to use to get the job done. Hoover Dam was such a huge project, they had to invent whole new techniques, like a giant refrigerator to cool the concrete as it's set. And that's using the power of the how part. Those are the 5 amazing projects that remind me most strongly of the 5 parts of a project: who, what, when, where, and how. As I said, each project has to have all 5 parts, and all those 5 parts have to work together and be balanced. But these projects seem to be especially good examples of those parts, don't you think? There's actually a 6th question that is also very important, and it's the combination of who and what. And that question is, why? As you just saw, each of the first 5 questions could be answered by itself. But why requires 2 other questions to make any sense. Why are we doing that? Why did he marry her? Why did they build a house? Why does anyone do anything? The answer to any of that is always why. And the question why can be very powerful in creating projects. One of my most influential teachers was Tony Robbins. Tony used to say, if you have a big enough why, the how will take care of itself. Now that you understand the 5 parts of a project, in the next video, we'll look at the 5 steps that each project has to go through. And I think you might see that not just projects, but everything we do goes through those 5 steps. That's why I call them the 5 steps of progress. And I'll show you 5 more amazing projects, including the most out-of-this-world project. I hope you enjoyed learning about the 5 parts of a project. Have a super great day.